So this is my approach to doing the stational exam. So basically when you pick out a tooth, you're going to pick it up and you're going to look at it. So I picked up this tooth and it has one root. So that to me tells me that it's going to be a premolar because we're not doing any anterior teeth on this exam. So now that I know that it's a premolar, I know it can't be the maxillary first premolar because that would have the bifurcated root. So the next thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to look at the shape of the crown. It's so loud in here. And so if you remember that maxillary premolars have an oval shaped crown and mandibular premolars have more of a boxy crown. Some people think of it as being more squarish or more round, and this one's definitely oval. So I picked up this tooth and I'm going to analyze the occlusal surface, and it's going to tell me that this is a mandibular premolar, okay? So now I have to decide if it's a first premolar or a second premolar. So if you remember, you're going to turn it to the proximal side. The buccal cusp tip is taller because this first premolar looks more like a canine. So I actually might even in the stational exam just put my pencil up next to it, and then it shows me that the cusps are not the same height, they're offset to the distal. So that one compared to this one. Can you see the difference in the height of the cusps?
Oh, yeah.
This cusp looks almost the same tall. The buccal cusp and the lingual cusp are the same height. Compared to this one, the buccal cusp is much taller.
Right.
So remember, mandibular first premolars look like canines because this buccal cusp is taller. The lingual cusp is a non-functional cusp that kind of reminds you of the cingulum on the canine. So again, this is the tooth I picked up. I know that it's mandibular, I know that it's a first premolar, so now I have to just decide left and right. So I'm going to feel for the depression in the root. It has a deep distal depression. The root is also curved towards the distal. So then I'm literally going to put this next to my face and I'm going to go, yep, this is on the right hand side. And then for me, I just count from 27, 28. This is premolar 28. So mandibular right premolar, first premolar, number 28. Okay, so then go to my next station and I pull out a tooth. So I'm noticing that it has two roots, so this is a mandibular molar. So now I have to decide if this is a mandibular first, second, or possibly a third. So the roots are not fused together, so it's not a third molar. So it's either first or second. So I'm going to look at the occlusal pattern. The mandibular first molar has 5 cusps. It's got 3 on the buccal, 2 on the lingual, versus the, try and get them in the right way, versus the second molar has 4 cusps. So I picked this one up, it has 5 cusps. From the buccal aspect, it has 3 cusps. From the lingual, it has 2. So now I know this is buccal, it's a mandibular first molar, have to decide which side of the mouth it goes on. So, oops, which one was it? So I'm gonna evaluate the roots. This root is wider than this root. That makes this the distal root because you can see part of the mesial root from the distal aspect. So now that I know that this is buccal and this is mesial, it is also on the left side of the mouth. So this is a mandibular first premolar, tooth number 19. And I have to count just like everybody else. No shame in that. Okay, so then if we were going to pick up the other mandibular molar, this one, the way that I can tell that this is a second mandibular molar, first of all, it's mandibular because there's 2 roots. I know that it's a second because each cusp is about the same size. And that's what gives this tooth that plus-shaped occlusal pattern. So that's also could be a question, right? Which tooth has the occlusal pattern that looks like a plus sign? And it's this one, the mandibular second. Okay, so I know it's a mandibular second, so I have to go through that same process, which is buccal, which is lingual, which is mesial, which is distal. So we're going to look at it from the proximal view, and we're going to try to see where the height of contour is. Because remember, on the buccal aspect, we called it the buccal belly bulge, meaning that the buccal ridge, buccal height of contour is towards the CEJ. Let me look at it for a minute, make sure I'm saying it right. And on this lingual aspect, the height of contour is more up here. So this makes this side buccal, okay? So now we know it's a mandibular, we know that it's a second molar, we know this side is buccal. Now we need to know if it goes on the left side or the right side. So again, we're gonna evaluate the roots. You can also evaluate the occlusal plane, right? The mesial occlusal surface is wider than the distal surface. So again, this is mesial, this is buccal, This is mesial. This one goes on the lower right-hand side. So 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Tooth number 31. And I also have to count just like everybody else. No problem there. Okay, so then I pick up another tooth, right? And this one is the bifurcated root, okay? So then we automatically know this is a maxillary first premolar because it's the only tooth in the ones we're working with that have the bifurcation. Right. So then we have to decide which side, so we know what's first. So then we have to decide which side's buccal, which side's lingual. The buccal cusp is just bigger. There's also this buccal ridge, and so this is buccal. So remember, the maxillary first premolar is the only tooth that has the mesial root concavity that extends up onto the crown. It's also the only tooth that has what we call the mesial marginal spillway or the mesial marginal ridge groove. Anyway, so on this tooth, this is the mesial because the depression is deeper and extends onto the crown. So, and then also there's a slight distal curvature to the roots, a little bit. And so this tooth goes on the, over here, the roots curving to the distal. Okay, so this is tooth number 12. I'm like, I go. So the way I always go is like 6, 11, canines, 12. So when you pick up a 3-rooted tooth, obviously it's a maxillary molar. And so the maxillary first and second molars look very similar in terms of their crown shape. The thing that's going to differentiate them for you on the stational is the cusp of Carabelli, okay? So you're going to know that this is the lingual root, the lonely lingual. This is the buccal side, the 2 buccal roots. So then we're going to look, this root is wider. So this is mesial lingual. So we're going to look on this mesial lingual cusp and we're going to feel it. There is no cusp of Carabelli. So this is a maxillary second molar. Okay. So now that I know that this is a maxillary second molar, we know that this is buccal, we know that this is mesial, and I'm going to orient it to my mouth and it goes over here.
So it's like 15.
So 15.
Was I right? Yes, okay.
Yes. Okay. So what's left? So kind of from there, it's all the same, right? So, so then let's talk about wisdom teeth because we haven't really talked about those very much. So for wisdom teeth, the thing that you're going to look for is that if the root is entirely, is the root entirely fused together. There's not going to be any space at all between the roots. Okay, and this is important because when you look at the mandibular, wisdom teeth, it looks almost like a second molar. So it has 4 cusps that are, it's not always, but has 4 cusps that are nearly equal in size. It can have a lot of supplemental grooves on the occlusal pattern, but what's going to give it away is that the roots are fused together. Versus on a maxillary wisdom tooth, third molar, it has what we call a heart-shaped crown. So there's 2 cusps on this side, 1 cusp on this side. This is the buccal aspect with 2 cusps, the lonely lingual cusp over here. This Kilgore's not a good example because it has some bifurcation. Yours are going to be completely fused. So you have a root that's completely fused. You have to determine if it's a mandibular or maxillary. You're going to look at the shape of the crown. So if it has 3 cusps, it's a maxillary third molar. If it has 4 cusps, sorry, I'm trying to find the buccal. If it has 4 cusps and the root is fused together, this is a mandibular third molar. So maxillary third molars are easier to determine left from right and buccal and lingual because the buccal side has the 2 cusps. And the lingual cusp is the biggest cusp, but on the buccal side, the mesial buccal is bigger. So that tells me that this is buccal, this is mesial, so this is tooth number 16. Okay? So then if I look at this mandibular third molar, well, right away you can look at this tooth and you can tell that there's there's 2 roots on this buccal surface, right? You can tell that this is where the roots separate. So this is buccal. And then you can kind of see a bit of an indentation on this side over here. So this is the mesial aspect. You can also look at the crown. The mesial aspect of the tooth is wider. And then kind of the same rules apply, right? And so I'm even struggling with this one just a little bit. So again, if we look at that buccal belly bulge, this is buccal, this is mesial, and it goes over here. Okay, honestly, the extracted tooth for wisdom teeth are much easier, because if you look at this tooth, this is a maxillary third molar, and I know because it has 3 cusps. It's the heart-shaped crown, and you can see that the roots are fused together. But if you actually draw on them, don't you guys do this? But if you made an imaginary line here, you can see where the roots are fused together. Okay, so you can see that this is the lonely lingual root, and this is the lingual cusp, and you can see that this is 2 buccal roots because there's kind of a separation. So then you can actually see that this is the mesial distal root, and that this is the mesial buccal root because it's wider. And so mesial, buccal, this, and you can also see that the roots are curved somewhat distally. And so this is tooth number 16 again. All right. Are we good? Any other